Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open Arthur Schopenhauer's brilliantly cynical guide to argumentation, The Art of Always Being Right. And spoiler alert, this isn't about finding the truth. It's all about winning.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever been in that situation, that feeling of pure frustration when you have all the facts, you know you're right, but you still somehow walk away from the debate having lost? Yeah, we've all been there.
Well, Schopenhauer had a fascinating take on why this happens. He argued that when we get into a dispute, our real goal usually isn't to uncover the truth. Nope, the goal is just victory. And it's a victory driven by something he called our innate vanity.
So what's the core problem here? According to Schopenhauer, we make this one huge fatal assumption. We walk into a debate thinking everyone involved is interested in finding objective truth, but he argues that's almost never really the case.
Schopenhauer's diagnosis is, well, it's pretty brutal, actually. He claims our intellectual vanity is just so incredibly sensitive that once we've stated a position, we would rather defend it to the death, even if we realize it's wrong, than admit our opponent has a better point.
Okay, and this is where Schopenhauer makes a really crucial, and let's be honest, a pretty controversial distinction. He basically splits the world of reason into two completely different things.
See, on one side, you've got logic. He sees this as the pure, clean science of figuring out what's true. But on the other side, you have what he calls dialectic. And for Schopenhauer, this is the art of fighting with words, where the only goal is to win, by any means necessary, fair or foul.
He even gives it a meaner name, Eristical Dialectic. He calls it the art of intellectual fencing. Just think about that for a second. The point isn't to be correct. It's to score points, to get the best of your opponent. So he basically went and cataloged all the dishonest tricks people use to win when they know they're flat out wrong.
All right, so let's get into the good stuff, the actual toolkit. Schopenhauer lays out 38 of these stratagems. Now, we don't have time for all of them, but let's look at a few of the most powerful and, frankly, the most common ones you'll see out in the wild. Let's start with a really nasty but super effective psychological trap, stratagem number 8. The goal here is brutally simple. Make your opponent see red. Why? Because an angry person is totally incapable of judging correctly. Their reason just gets clouded by emotion, and they can't see where their own advantage is anymore.
And you see this all the time, right? Especially online. It's classic trolling. By being unfair or just plain rude, you're not actually trying to refute their argument. You're trying to break their composure. The second they get angry, they've already lost their footing.
Okay, so now let's explore something a little more subtle. This is a trick of language, stratagem 12.
This one is all about framing. It's about choosing words and metaphors that already have the judgment you want the listener to make baked right into them before you've even made your real argument.
So the label itself becomes the argument, you see? What one person calls public worship, their opponent will call bigotry. You're embedding your conclusion right into the language. It's like poisoning the well before anyone's even had a chance to drink.
But what if the facts are just totally against you, but you happen to have an audience? For that, Schopenhauer gives us stratagem 28. This is the art of making an objection that sounds really clever and convincing to the average person, but that any expert, like your opponent, would immediately know is complete nonsense. So the goal isn't to beat your opponent logically. It's to make them look ridiculous in front of everyone else. Because for them to refute your silly point, they'd have to give a long, boring, technical explanation. By the time they do that, the audience has already laughed and decided you're the winner. You've won their approval, even if you lost the argument.
So what happens when you've tried everything else? The facts aren't on your side, and your opponent is clearly about to win. Well, Schopenhauer saves the most desperate and, frankly, the ugliest move for last.
This is the nuclear option, the final weapon in the arsenal. Stratagem number 38.
This is the ultimate diversion. You just abandon the topic of the argument completely and you attack the person themselves. It's the last resort of every internet troll and frustrated debater. When you can't attack the argument, you attack the person making it.
But here is the most important takeaway from all of this. Schopenhauer's goal wasn't to create an army of intellectual thugs. The real value of this whole thing is learning self-defense.
The real purpose of learning all these dishonest tricks is to become immune to them. It's about spotting the tactics as they happen.
Because once you understand the method, the attack loses all its power before it can even land.
And this all leads to a really simple three-step defense. First, you have to recognize the trick. So when someone says, only a fanatic would believe that, you immediately think, that's stratagem 12, loaded language. Second, you calmly name the trick. You could say something like, let's set aside labels for a moment. And third, and this is the most important part, you ignore the diversion and steer the conversation right back to the actual topic. You say, and focus on the evidence instead. And just like that, you've completely disarmed them.
By understanding this cynical art of winning, you're not learning to manipulate, you're learning to vaccinate yourself against manipulation. You're arming yourself to better defend what's true. And that's a pretty provocative thought to end on, isn't it? Sometimes, to protect the truth, you first have to understand the anatomy of a lie.